So I want to talk to you guys about quiz 2, and I am a little reticent on talking about it here because I don't have everyone's submissions. I got 3 people who have not turned them in. However, I'm going to go ahead anyway because I don't want to drag this out. And the reason I don't like to do it before they're all in is that I'm going to be giving the answers to whoever didn't turn it in yet. But if you haven't turned it in, please send it via email. So I want to review this. Xander, you hearing us?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So here is the prompt. First of all, submit your essay as a docx or PDF. And you guys were mostly pretty good with that. And the reason I ask that you send it in as a docx or PDF is that when I get it, it's already opened, Canvas opens it, and I can write comments. I can do highlights. Some of you saw this. I put a highlight and have a comment on the side. It's what the software was designed for. It's not designed for other kinds of documents. And especially people have sent me Google Docs. And so that doesn't open in Canvas. And then when I try to open it, it's in whoever's Google Docs account. Then I have to ask permission for them so that they'll unlock it for me. And I still don't get it in the Canvas software, which I can write comments and things. So most of you did this, almost all of you did this. If you submitted, that was good. And keep up the good work. And so this is what I had on the prompt. 3-paragraph essay on one of the starred works. So I'm going to show you what a starred work looks like. This blue star. There was a small number of you that just wrote about anything that was in the book. And that's what starred means. And so I want to point that out. Paragraph 1, an identification of the artwork that is the subject of your essay. And most of you got that correct. Now, there were a few ones that kind of listed maybe the artist or the time period. So somebody wrote about, say, the pyramids. And they wrote, I chose to write about the 4th dynasty. When it probably should have written about, I chose to write about the pyramids at Giza. Small problem, just saying. And so you went to size, title, date of creation, place. And the museum where it can be found. And in the pyramids, they weren't able to move the museum, move it to a museum. So they moved the museum to Giza. So it's right there. Paragraph 2, sampling of results based on your browsing through university library. And a couple of you had some problems and had asked questions about this, and I was happy to answer them, but I want to clear it up. This is how you would conduct the search on the library website. You go to articles, and then you filter out full text, and peer reviewed. Those are the limiters on the left-hand side of the screen once you get the articles. And that will actually reduce the number of entries in your search. And so, describe the interdisciplinary connections you find in your search results. This was probably the biggest issue. And so, it occurred to me, I said, too many of you guys are not doing, are missing the mark on this. So I should come in here and explain what this is. And so basically a discipline, this is out of the dictionary, a branch of knowledge, typically one studied in higher education. Quote, sociology is a fairly new discipline. Similar field of study, branch of knowledge, course of study, subject, all lost my spacers, but anyway, that's the definition of what that is. And it's kind of, how should I say? Let me show you. And let me make sure my screen share is correct. Can you see that, Xander? I didn't put this on here. That's like too much. List of academic. Okay. You're cutting out. But you're there. Academic discipline or field of study, a branch of knowledge that is taught and researched at the college or university level. So that's the definition. And so wanted to kind of go down here. And one, that's the overview. But secondly, we've divided the branches of disciplines into groups. And most of the time, our education system is branched around those groups. So we have the humanities, which is what you're in right here. And under that, we got history, language and linguistics, literature, performing arts, philosophy, religion. Sometimes philosophy and religion are kind of linked together in some, and the visual arts, which is exactly where we're at here. And so anyway, but you'll notice, I hope you noticed that in this class, at least so far, I'm hoping that we have looked at the work, including at least all of these. Now, we haven't hit literature so much, but much of what we have studied to date is before the invention of written languages. And so anyway, but yeah, we talk about, say, in Egypt, the Book of the Dead, we talk about, we even break it down into words, which reminds me, Xander, when we were here, we were talking about the aqueduct and what duct meant. And I was thinking about what Xander said, because I was looking at it as more of a pathway, and he was looking at it as to pull. And I started thinking about it. I kept thinking about this after class. And so I wanted to introduce this word duct in this way. Abduct. That's right out of the Latin duct. And if you were abducted, what happened? Somebody came by and kidnapped you. You were abducted. You were pulled away from
From
where?
somewhere.
Pardon?
Oh, from somewhere. I mean, ab is a Latin Latin part of a word that says like means from.
From. Yes. Yes, that's right. Pull from. Abduct. That's exactly right. And so that's a good example of what hopefully we'll keep talking about in this class, about what these words mean, the language, the linguistics and stuff. And we're currently on Roman art and the Latin language. And as we move forward, more and more of the language is influenced by the periods we study. And so, yeah, this is a perfect example. And so I want to scroll down here a little bit. Number 3, social sciences, anthropology, archaeology, area studies. This is kind of a more specialized thing. I want to see if I can get it here. And so let me make sure I got the screen share. Looks like it. Good. So area studies, can refer to a geographic region, Appalachian studies, American studies, European studies, Iranian studies, etc., African studies. And then you can break it down into cultural or ethics, or excuse me, ethnic. My mask is really bugging me today. And so anyway, that's it, area studies. And make sure I still got a screen. Yeah, we're good. And so natural sciences, space. And when we talk about things like astronomy, that's space studies in a pretty major way. And in another way, it's mathematics too, but earth sciences, life science, chemistry and physics almost always touch this. When we're talking about how to build those pyramids we were talking about, it's engineering might be the subject, but in terms of disciplines, engineering is like a major interdisciplinary area. It includes mathematics and physics and chemistry, and a lot of times in a pretty major way, because some of you guys were talking about things like gravity, and that's physics in a real big way. And so anyway, formal sciences, which is the mathematics, statistics. That's big in today's world. Everything is thrown at you through the language of statistics, which is what's like currently in the news, where we see a lot of statistics. About that COVID virus, and these people whose discipline is life sciences, which is medicine, which incorporates chemistry and statistics and a lot of other things. Bottom line, they seem to want to talk in statistical analysis And unless you are familiar with the language, it all just sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, which is why we have a lot of confusion, excuse me, confusion about that. But at any rate, applied sciences, and this is huge. And this is applied sciences and professions. And so we do study professions in college, and they usually have their own, they're kind of a discipline, they're kind of interdisciplinary disciplines. You can't study agriculture without studying the weather, the DNA, chemistry of the soil, weather patterns, et cetera, et cetera. And as I said, architecture is interdisciplinary too. And so anyway, that's what we're talking about with interdisciplinary stuff. And so let me go back to this share. That's what disciplines mean. And so some of you were kind of off the mark on that. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because I realized that I never brought that up in class. I was asking you something that I kind of took for granted like that. And so here is an example from one of the papers, and I thought it was pretty good. This is paragraph 2, and I highlighted disciplines. And it said, I found many articles, and here are the disciplines. And I thought that, Hatshepsut talks about her life, the Egyptian religion, which is philosophy and religion, or religion itself can be a discipline. Gender studies, that falls under the area studies that we just saw. Architecture, that's an applied discipline, and it is in itself interdisciplinary. And so I thought the concluding sentence was really good too, except I didn't really know what relief meant in this context. And I think that what that meant, get this. I got it on the bottom. I don't think you can see it. Bottom line, real bottom line under the screen, I think that referred to the sculpture, the low relief sculpture, which would be individual arts. And so all of this, those are disciplines, and that's what I have. And so, any questions about that? No question. Well, good. And enable slideshow from beginning. Oh, lock myself out. And show I gotta get this. I'm apologize here. Share screen. Okay, good. Just double checking. Want to make sure that we're on the right place. And then and I believe because I can see this, we have it. Good. So continue with the Roman Empire. And what we looked at last time was really kind of centered on a lot of the architecture. And that's okay. In fact, it was all good. And they were very creative, they were very influential, they were great engineers and builders. Romans knocked it out of the park. And that's why we still have so much of their buildings and sites today. Even though they had a lot of enemies and a lot of people trying to tear down their buildings, we still have them, at least in part. But I want to introduce you to painting a little bit. And this is from the Roman Republic, which is before the empire. But this is a pretty good case study in how their painting style developed. And this is a wall painting. And you can see it. You can't really make much out of it. But what you can see is that it's divided up into sections. It's almost like a graphic novel in how it's divided up. And that is something a little different than what we've seen. We've seen continuous friezes along a single line, but separate. These look like frames, and in fact, that's what they're painted to be. And this is the second style, Dionysiac Mystery Frieze, and this goes back to Dionysus, and Apollo, Greek gods. And as I said, the Etruscans and the Romans borrowed heavily from the Greek gods. And you can see this, Dionysus was the god of pleasure and debauchery, if you will. And so you see he has he's like the party animal of the gods. But at any rate, I want to point this out. I put a star by this. And because this is like a real breakthrough here. And it's actually after Pompeii. You see, it's 50 to 40 before Common Era, and it's a fresco, and it's large. It's almost 9 feet high, and it's in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. But I want to show you this. Look at this fresco. What's different about this from anything that we've seen to date? Well, let me tell you. We've seen some landscapes and things in the past, but for the most part, that stuff had been really pretty flat. This shows the illusion of deep space on a two-dimensional surface. You guys that are art majors, what's this called? How these recede into the background. What's that called? Giving you some jargon here, chance to use your art vocabulary. How about linear perspective? And they teach you that. It's something that comes back in the Renaissance. But you see, these roof lines, they're on an angle. They're on an angle to give you the idea of depth. And it's called linear perspective. I'm not sure that this is actual geometric perspective, we would call this approximate perspective. But it is an indication that it's a new way of describing deep space. Now, in Egyptian times, they did that too, and they would use overlapping figures, and they would get smaller and smaller in some cases. But this looks like the wall has disappeared. It's like you have this part of the wall here and here, but then you have this monument, this what might be called a gazebo of some sort. Have the atrium here, no roof. And so it's like the wall completely dissolved. That was, as I said just a moment ago, that was one of the contributions of the Italian Renaissance, was that they figured out how to do this mathematically, where you could draw an horizon line and create single or multiple vanishing points on that horizon line, and everything above and below that horizon line, you draw a line to that vanishing point, which causes the eye to believe that there is deep space. And you guys in art, you know this, you guys have known this forever. And you take a vanishing point, you have two lines that converge at the vanishing point. And it might look like a road that goes into the distance, or a building that is very long. That's what's happening here. This is remarkable. And this gives us a degree of naturalism that we haven't seen very much of. We've seen a lot of symbolism, but naturalism, or quote, realism to this degree, doesn't really happen so much. And so I brought this. You guys ever seen this from downtown? Go to the ball game, go Highway 40, you go past the Sheraton Hotel. And this is what it looks like. This was a guy named Richard Haas, and he painted this like probably 30, 40 years ago. But at any rate, he took the old Edison Brothers building and they converted it into a hotel. But bottom line is this. He painted it so it appears as though it has features of classical architecture. And this is the side from the highway. And this is the side, I think, that faces west. And, but at any rate, and you see, you put in some Egyptian obelisk and the statue and the column. Another column that's a pedestal, more St. Louis above the top. A depiction of King Louis, I think it's the 9th, is that right? For whom St. Louis is named. But at any rate, we still do this. And so this is in a lot of ways not unlike this. This is on a large scale, to be sure, but we still use a lot of those same, what we would call artistic devices, tricks to fool the eye into making it seem as though the wall itself has disappeared. And this is a really good example, because side by side, this, you can see this is flat, and this looks much more three-dimensional. And so here's a second style wall painting. I'm not expecting you to remember the first, second, third, and fourth styles. But I do want to show you that actually they were pretty advanced in painting. And this is the third style, can't see much. And this is the fourth style, which kind of reverts back to the first style. But you see, these are paintings of paintings on a wall. And so you see him painted in there, the frame. And you can see here the illusionism. I can zoom in on this one too, because this is actually quite impressive. This looks like something quite possibly out of Renaissance, because not only are they doing the architecture and the space, they're doing the human figures in somewhat, actually a pretty advanced state of realism or naturalism. And so anyway, and you see this is from Pompeii. And so this is what they did. They painted with great skill and illusionism. And so here is a kind of portrait style that emerges out of Etruscan culture into Republican Roman culture. And so in this, the naturalism kind of gives way a little bit to showing the features of these people. And you can see they have big eyes and, you know, anatomically they're a little bit off, but still pretty good. But the idea here, and go back to Etruscan times, and the sarcophagi, we'd see all of these depictions of the people buried inside this sarcophagus, ancestor veneration, and so on. And so another painting from a house in Pompeii. And again, it's in pretty tough shape. Seated portrait of the Greek poet Menander. Fourth style. And so here we go, still life. And this is from Herculaneum, and this is during the Roman Empire in the Common Era. But as you can see, a lot of this you can put side by side with the kind of painting that you'll see in the 1400s Common Era. And so another 200 CE, and I wanted to point this out from Egypt. And Xander was talking about this a couple of, maybe last week, about how the Romans sent Roman citizens out to and throughout their empire. In one place that they sent people in large numbers was Egypt. And so we have this mix of Egyptian culture and Roman culture. And do I have this? I'm going to jump up ahead because I need to. I want to show you this. And this is kind of a relatively new this is all, let's see, sarcophagi. Here it is. And so when the Roman Empire set out and they sent people out throughout the empire, we have this intermix of cultures. And what happens in Egypt is that a lot of the practices, traditions of the Egyptians start to appear in Roman form. And this is a mummy of a Roman. And you can see, still have some of the hieroglyphics, you got the Anubis and all this stuff. But this is a Roman portrait. It's a lot different than what we've seen. And so this is 100, 120 Common Era. And mummy of Artemitrios, Artemitridoros, excuse me, from Egypt. And so this was kind of relatively unknown for a long time of what was really going on with that intermix of Roman and Egyptian cultures. But in recent times, they've discovered a lot of these kinds of mummies out in the desert, and that they are Roman and Egyptian all at the same time. So this is where we were. And that is Roman painting. And what I really like to do is talk to you about Roman sculpture. And Roman sculpture, funeral relief portraits from the Jesiarch, 30 BCE. And so again, they treated their dead with veneration. Again, head of a Republican priest, pre-Roman Empire. One of the things that happens, not entirely coincidentally, is that what we see at this time in Greece is what we call Hellenistic sculpture, where the ideal is replaced with the emotional or the expressive. Now, they still had a great deal of naturalism, but in classical Greek sculpture, almost everything is idealized. Even if you see a sculpture of Hercules and he's an old man, and he's tired, he still looks like he works out at Gold's Gym every other day. So we'd have the ideal, but in Hellenistic times, they really start to want to portray emotions, and that's really what we start to see happening here. As I said earlier, a lot of Roman sculpture was directly connected to Greek sculpture because Greece was still this influential, powerful place. It was still like the Silicon Valley of ancient times, and a lot of the learning, a lot of the philosophy, a lot of the arts still emanated. And so a Roman general, again, we see there's still part of this ideal, and the guy is just, sculpted, as they say. He's cut, out of marble, you say. But again, Pompey the Great, and there's an emotional quality here. What would you think? It's looks like he's kind of what? A little bit sanguine, a little bit. Yes, it sure does. Yes, and think about that compared to those statues of these stoic leaders and their, their face and look like strict determination. And those who are impervious to the kind of the travails of everyday life. This is, yeah, it's a look like he's longing, look like he's missing somebody or something. And so here's a coin. This is a portrait of Julius Caesar, and it's 44 BCE, and it's when Julius Caesar was killed. And from the ancient world, we still get our idea of coins. We still use it. It may not last anymore. We're running out of coins and stuff, using cards and stuff. But bottom line, this is a Roman coin. Denarius. I'm going to ask Xander this question. Dinar. Where in the world would you find a dinar?
I know you can find them in North Africa, like where I'm from, Tunisia. You pay in dinar. There are different types of dinars, but I
Yes.
know in those countries, which used to be also, I think they used to they used to be Roman during those times. Those countries usually tend to have dinars.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's still in circulation too. That's what a number of countries, North Africa and the Middle East, still call their currency dinar, like we use the word dollar. And so, yeah, again, continuity and so on. Man with portrait bust of his ancestors. This is something that the Romans developed as well. The idea of a bust, and a typical bust will be almost, it'll include the collarbones and parts of the shoulder like this. It's more than just a head. And again, it'll point to some things here. Let's take a look at this guy. Again, expressive. He's kind of, I don't know, maybe remorseful, maybe introspective, maybe something. But you get the idea that these figures are alive and that they feel something. And that's particularly important. And again, ancestor veneration. And I would say ancestor worship, but that worship is a little strong. But ancestor veneration. And look at how much sculpture is devoted to the funerary, the sarcophagi, and so on. And so here we are. This is an example. This depicts a funeral. And this is where you see this, looks like somebody laying down on a recliner or something, but basically that's the sarcophagus, which has the sculptural image of the person being buried inside this sarcophagus. And so anyway, this is portrait of Augustus. And this is early 1st century, and it's a copy of a bronze original from circa 20 BCE. So as we were talking about that, he was actually ends up being the emperor of the Roman Empire and Augustus. And so you see, there's still a little bit of that emotion that we see here. It's not quite stoic. He looks like a bold leader, and he looks like he knows what he's doing. He looks brave. He looks smart, and he's the emperor. However, we also see this belief in gods, in this and portrait bust of Livia from Egypt. And this is truly a Roman sculpture. And as I was saying, the bust did some of the shoulders. Actually, you can see it's been broken here. But a portrait bust, that's a Roman art form. And again, from Egypt. 1st century, Common Era. Ara Pachis Auguste. And that's the Augustus Caesar's piece, Pachis, piece. And so, prosperity, life, the good life, procession of the funeral of the imperial family. Again, now I can't stress this enough, that you see the looks on the faces, and it's just so much more naturalistic. It's what they did. And here is the Flavian Amphitheater, which we discussed, and this is a drone shot, obviously. Oh, I did want to back up though. But you see all of this stuff down here. This is the remnants of what was under the floor of the Colosseum, and what we were talking about last week, about how they staged naval battles and things and filled it up, and then occasionally let wild animals out. This is where all of that was. It wasn't quite like, it was kind of like backstage in the theater, except for it was underground, and so the show was staged, if you will, right there. And I'm trying to find this here. Let's see how new this is. They have, I don't see it. The more recent pictures I've seen, they've kind of built a walkway out there so you could actually look down into that. But anyway, portrait of Vespasian. Again, naturalism, emotion. This guy's getting bald, he's got wrinkles on his face. I can identify with that. Just say. Flavian woman. And again, the hair. We think that actually Roman women of status likely did have their hair curled and fixed in this way. And this is a bust portrait. See the shoulders. And we talked about the triumphal arches. We looked at that on Wednesday last week. And again, decorated with much sculpture and the memorial columns with the spiral friezes and two tandai. I don't know what tandai is. Well, this is plural. And if it were singular, it'd be tondo. And a tondo is a circular artwork, whether it's in relief or a circular painting. Just say. And the tandai of Constantine addressing the Roman people between the statues of Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, etc. Portrait of Hadrian, very significant Roman emperor. He's the guy that built the wall between Scotland and England. Hadrian's villa, and you can see just, I gotta say this while I have this slide up, and that is that this kind of architecture for palaces and residences, that had a big revival in Hollywood in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And a lot of movie stars built mansions that kind of looked like this, complete with the statues, complete with the archways, and so on. And so this is kind of the language of the rich and famous. Carved out of rock. Mosaic. We talked about mosaic a little bit in this class, and you guys know what that is. It's placement of tiles or other stones or seashells or something embedded in some kind of mortar and create images. And they got to be very adept at this. Ceilings and mural paintings come out of the Roman Empire. We have those. And so this is kind of cool. If you will, funerary relief of a vegetable vendor. So what does this tell you? Tells you that the guy sold vegetables. Looks like he sold some bread too, just looking at the piece here. Well, if you were looking at status and class, if you were looking at their society from a sociological level, you'd have the military class, you'd have the religious class, you'd have the wealthy, you would have the middle class, you'd have the lower class, right? So this was made, and it's a funerary relief, and a guy's a vegetable vendor. He's not an emperor, he's not a philosopher, he's not in that He's not a priest. He's not in that upper class. And so this is, again, can't say this enough, that in the Roman Empire, and this comes out of Greece and the Roman Republic, it was this kind of egalitarianism that everybody was important, especially if you were a Roman. Now, they owned slaves and things, to be sure, but the Romans had this idea that everybody should be kept happy and that everybody was important. And so, like I showed you, the Circus Maximus, the place where they stage horse and chariot races, 400,000 seats. Well, that wasn't just for royalty. That was for everyday people, tourists, and it was kind of like going to a Cardinals game. Yes.
So was social class not as big like a deal for them?
I'm not sure if it was, well, how should I say this? They didn't discriminate based on that. Not like we see in subsequent cultures where if you're in the lower class, you're going to be cutting stone and working in a mine all your life. This was kind of more flattened out, and a lot of middle class and everybody shared in the wealth, prosperity, and they were entertained in things, and you could go to, say, the Colosseum and stuff. Now, there were other classes of undesirables for, like, let's say, Christians who would be arrested and thrown to the lions. But yeah, but it was more flattened out, it was more democratic, if you will. And you can see in mid-second century, the reliefs just fabulous. Great skill, great craft. Equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. You see it's bronze, turned green. See somebody rubbing that horse's nose or something. But at any rate, portrait bust of Commodus. I don't say, put too many syllables. In the guise of Hercules. And so, yeah, naturalism, they had some fun with it. Very skilled. Sarcophagus, again, how much of this is monumental? How much of this is funerary artwork? Asiatic sarcophagus. And there's the mummy. Mummy portrait of a young woman. That's at same. There. What I was talking about here. Roman portrait. Kawara. Another mummy portrait of a priest. And see, the distinction here is that you see this headband. And so that distinguishes this person as a priest. But in terms of a lot of other things, they're kind of equal. And so they survive. This is pretty much what the Romans do. They're on autopilot in a lot of ways. Everything kind of doesn't change so much until Oh, this is the baths of Diocletian. And it was remodeled by Michelangelo Buonarroti. Gotta say that slow. That's the Michelangelo that you hear about. Sistine Chapel ceiling. And what I want to point out here is this. The idea of painting and sculpture and architecture, in a lot of ways, those lines were blurred. They were for centuries, but especially through the Renaissance. And so we got statues by, we don't have many left, but we have evidence of statues by Michelangelo, and obviously his painting, and obviously architecture as well. And Leonardo da Vinci was a painter, sculptor, scientist, etc. And so anyway, again, pointing to the idea of expression and naturalism, and this is mid-3rd century. So what we're coming up to, and this is where I want to go with this, yes, here. Portraits of the 4 tetrarchs from Constantinople. And so what happens? Emperor Constantine, he decides, well, how many of you guys know anything about Constantine anyway? Just kind of throwing something out here. Constantine, Roman emperor, first Christian Roman emperor. He embraces Christianity and makes Christianity the official religion. And he moves the center of the Roman Empire from Rome to this place, Byzantium, renamed Constantinople, which is in Turkey, which is modern day Istanbul. And so Constantine is a transformative figure. He leads a lot of changes in the Roman Empire, not to say just about moving the capital and changing over to Christianity. They really embrace it like in a big way. And so I'm trying to think. Here is the Arch of Constantine from Rome, and here it is. And there is Constantine distributing largesse. North frieze of the Arch of Constantine. You guys know what largesse is? No? Is it big? Small s? Large s? Just not serious. Largesse means gifts of money and treasure. And so you see politicians in a lot of ways talk about largesse when they talk about people bribing politicians to vote one way or another. It's largesse. And so anyway, that's it. This is ill-gotten gains. And he's distributing all of this stuff. They were prosperous. He saved, in some accounts, he saved the empire. What was happening with Rome was that they were increasingly being invaded by peoples from the north. It was kind of the beginning of the end, or it was kind of the end of the Pax Romana. if you will. And so here is his bust. And this is from Rome. He was an emperor. We kind of know what he looks like. And when he moved the center of the empire to Byzantium, people still identified a lot of things as from Byzantium, they called it Byzantine. And so there's a Constantine portrait. So at any rate, Diocletian, here's the 4 tetrarchs. And so sarcophagus of a philosopher, you see what he's doing. This is late, just 50 years or so before Constantine. So anyway, getting a little short on time, skipped over a lot of things, but you feel like you have an idea of what these people were all about and what they did and what their artwork looked like and why they made it and their values. That being the case, we'll pick up fresh on Wednesday. I'll see you guys later.